this is David Stark from WatcherPass.com, your website for movie news, reviews, interviews, deals, and recommendations. Today I'm joined by Cicero and Kimo Easterwood, the directors of the all-new documentary Happy Happy Joy Joy, the Ren Stimpy story. It goes into the backstory of one of the 90s most interesting, controversial, and funny shows, and kind of goes into the personalities that made it and some of the controversy that happened after. It's a really interesting documentary, especially if you're from that time and kind of fondly remember the TV show. It'll give you a new appreciation of the show and the people, and also probably teach you a lot about some of the personalities that were in there. So I'm going to get started talking to Ron soon, but first let's check out the trailer.
You have to keep tapping like that! You bloated sack of protoplasm!
The current day examples of shows that I think were influenced by Ren and Stimpy are all of the shows.
Why won't they leave me?
Ren and Stimpy was an anomaly in its time.
It was an artist-driven show.
I thought I was having an acid flashback.
Ren and Stimpy opened the doors saying to everyone out there, no more rules.
Happy, happy, happy. Joy, joy, joy.
It's like I'm working on a show that is revolutionizing TV animation. And it all emanated from John.
We all kind of thought that John was going to be the next Walt Disney.
People always ask me if I identify with either of them. Well, I'm not going to say that I identify with an idiot, but I guess I do identify with an ass.
Shows were delivering months late.
That pissed off the advertisers big time.
We did get death threats.
His behavior got really bad.
It was just like you lived in the kingdom of John, and he's sick.
Is there anything you would have done differently?
I shut the camera off. I'll give you a super honest answer.
So thank you so much for joining, both of you. I know that you must be very busy. The film is out. I love the film. You can read the review and see that I really love the film. Ren and Stimpy was a big part of my childhood, so I guess thank you for all the footage in there that kind of reminded me how great that show was. And who do I bill for my therapy now that I've seen all the revelations in the movie? Do I say it directly to both of you, or?
Sure, we'll split the cost.
Okay.
Checks in the mail.
I'll warn everyone that I try to keep most interviews spoiler free or have clear spoiler markings, but I don't really think I can do that in this interview just because there's so many revelations in the documentary. So if you haven't seen the documentary, definitely go see it. It's available on video on demand through Gravitas Ventures. You can watch it on every platform. You can rent it, buy it, see it a couple times. It's a really fantastic kind of compilation of all the people that made Ren and Stimpy, the inspirations for Ren and Stimpy, and kind of the things that happened after Ren and Stimpy that dealt more with the creator and less with the show. But I guess so. Your film kind of came out at a very fortuitous time with the reboot announced by Comedy Central. Was that something that you both had inklings of when you were getting ready for release, or was it just kind of random luck that the documentary came out and then the Comedy Central announced a reboot?
Yeah, we had no idea. We did know at Sundance. Vanessa Coffey came to the premiere at Sundance, and she mentioned on the DL that she was going to go meet with the folks at Nickelodeon about a possible reboot. But we didn't think anything came of that, and Vanessa being Vanessa, the professional, she was going to be tight-lipped about it anyway. So yeah, it definitely came as a surprise. A surprise. We learned about it at the same time you did by reading the headlines.
It's very lucky. I mean, I wonder if maybe their announcement was stepped up because they knew that a big documentary was coming out that was talking about Ren and Stimpy, and maybe that would all kind of feed on each other.
Yeah, it's interesting. We did notice more activity, especially on the Viacom side. Prior to the film coming out, Viacom was not involved in the documentary other than them clearing the licensing. And that being said, they were incredibly generous because as first-time filmmakers, we were probably overly optimistic, although it did work out. And we just started shooting before we even had Viacom sign off. I can only imagine what life would have been like had they refused. But yeah, they were great. Lauren Mitchell in particular was super helpful. He's a director in their licensing department. He's since moved on, but he was instrumental in getting this all accomplished. So, big shout out to Viacom.
That's very good news. Yeah, I can't imagine what kind of hurdles that would have been had you started the project and then had some sort of rights issue.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Sundance, where you kind of heard some rumblings about Ren Stimpy coming back. One of the things that everyone kind of knows right now is in this pandemic, it seems like a lot of films that maybe were having some sort of theatrical run and then go into digital or DVD or kind of having to pivot. And so Ren Stimpy came out all on demand. How was that pivot since you had the festival circuit? Was it kind of a smooth transition, or did you have to pivot very quickly when everything kind of shut down?
Well, there were a couple companies that were interested in distributing the film, and so that process was always long, and figuring that out, not only for the short term to hopefully recoup our investment, because we put up all the money ourselves, but also, what's it going to mean for our future careers? Where is it going to be seen? You spend all this time and energy, you definitely want the film to get out there and find its audience. And certainly nothing's more frustrating when that happens as a filmmaker. So, it was tough because there was a couple groups that we, really liked. Ultimately, Gravitas said, hey, we'll release it in theaters. We think this is something that, even though it would be a limited release, could do well in theaters. So that was kind of the final deciding factor. And then, of course, COVID hit. So we always saw it primarily as a streamer. I mean, especially that, it just seems like where everybody's getting their content, especially documentaries these days, even though there has been a greater interest in the documentary format in the theatrical environment. So I think what's going to happen is they're going to release it, or they have released it, I should say, in VOD, and then it's going to be re-released in theaters. That's at least what we think is going to happen. So, we're pretty excited about that. Not too many docs see the big screen.
Yeah, that's fantastic news. Yeah, that's actually interesting. I didn't think about that maybe something that has already been released would come back to theaters. But I guess as theaters slowly open up or quickly open up depending on where you're living, they're going to want something to bring people back. And this has enough of that kind of nostalgia to get people to come and check it out.
Yeah, it'd be great if it was some kind of festival, right? You had Ren Stimpy episodes and then the documentary, or vice versa. Yeah, who knows?
A socially distanced festival with lots of Ren Stimpy masks.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And speaking of nostalgia, I loved the kind of style, especially at the start where you had that kind of old Americana style TV and that setup that kind of looked right out of the show. Where did you get that? And I mean, it seems like you both are really big fans of the show and kind of really know kind of what the heart and soul of that TV show is.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
No. So, I mean, I was not a fan of the show just because I had never watched it. So, I never watched.
Did you have a childhood? Just out of curiosity.
You know what? I went right to college, straight from the crib. No, yeah, it just wasn't. I just had never seen the show. So, and Ron had seen one episode when we started this. So the very first episode I saw was when we already decided to make this documentary, and I started watching episodes at that point. And then as far as the TVs, I mean, it was a good fit, because there's so, not only the nostalgic value, but the fact that, John Kay, the creator, that's sort of like when he was growing up. And so, because people say like, oh, those TVs don't match, like the era. It's like, of course they don't. It wasn't supposed to match.
I haven't seen that. Is that what somebody said?
No, but I can only imagine how many people are going to say like, my TV looked nothing like that when I watched it. But so yeah. But anyway, so yeah, as far as being a fan of the show, I mean, I had never seen an episode, so it was all new to me when I started.
That's quite a leap of faith. I guess you really trust Ron's opinion.
Well, that's how good the show was. You know, we
Yeah.
started watching episodes, and then we realized after watching episodes and doing a little research that this story needed to be told. You know, when we looked into it and nobody had done anything on it. There was a couple of things online on YouTube, maybe 7-minute long things, and we just watched interviews with John, the ones we could find, and the episodes, and did a little history research, and then we were just saying, like, we gotta do it.
That's awesome. And yeah, I was actually kind of pleasantly surprised when it came out, because you know I hadn't really thought about the show since I watched as a kid. You know, I always had fond memories, but it just kind of disappeared, and that kind of disappeared at a time when the internet wasn't really that common. So a lot of people probably didn't know why, unless you were reading kind of like the entertainment reporters and things like that. So it just kind of went away, and most kids, I imagine, just moved on to something else. So
yeah, that's a good point. You know, people forget about pre-internet age, you know, both from the production of the cartoon in the sense that it was, you know, largely analog. I mean, until they started implementing some digital painting, etc. But I mean, this is all hand drawn. I mean, this is at 24 frames a second. I mean, it's really extraordinary. And then, yeah, you know, back then you kind of had to search this kind of thing out. You know, it wasn't like, oh my God, it's a hit show. It's gonna go on Twitter the next day. You know, and I think that's one of the things that maybe people find so endearing about the show, is that it was really like this mass small club. You know what I mean? Like, you kind of had to find it, you kind of had to know about it, and if you had friends that knew about it, you would share it amongst yourself, but it really felt like it was just yours. And little did you know, there was millions of other people that kind of felt that same way, but without the connectivity of the internet, you had no way of knowing that.
Yeah. So doing some light research on my part. So it looks like the show deals a lot with John K. I can't pronounce his last name, but John
Kricfalusi.
What?
Kricfalusi.
Kricfalusi. Okay, John Kricfalusi, who was the creator. And in 2018, some pretty awful stories about his personal life and sexual misconduct came out. I wasn't sure on your timeline, did that come out while you were making this film? Was that like a pivot that you had to address, or was that something that kind of got this show in your minds about how this story kind of needed to be told?
The film version 1 was completely done.
Oh, wow.
And I mean done, like we were typing up the credits done. Spent, tens of thousands of dollars on a title sequence and motion graphics. And yeah, it was quite the journey. We got a call, while we were in the middle of wrapping it up, and somebody said, look, there's a story going to break about John. And, the interesting thing is he wasn't in the first version of the film. He had refused to be interviewed for, 2 years before that. So we constructed it by, looking at the show and celebrating it. And then John was this kind of mysterious creator that never appeared on camera, but was often referenced and shown in Archival. And we were happy with the film. That being said, is when that news broke, it was like, ooh, geez. Now there's two things that are happening. Either this film is going to never see the light of day, or B, it's going to become a much deeper film. And that's actually what happened. So not to sound like opportunist, but it actually kind of worked in our favor. The other thing that worked in our favor is that Robyn, who is one of John's victims, was or is incredibly smart and articulate, and was very open with us. I mean, she didn't really know us at all, and then we went interviewed her at her home in Chicago, and she was great on camera, not just about her experience, but just about the larger picture about how we should look at it, Ren and Stimpy post John. And so yeah, it was a complete redo, and it was Icarus came out around the same time, and of course we looked at Icarus and said, oh my God, they got this great twist in their story. But then when it happens to you as filmmakers, you're like shell-shocked for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I can't even imagine that pivot. Although, kind of as you said, it might have worked in your favor. One of the things I did appreciate about the documentary is the first part kind of really goes into the efforts of everyone involved. John K was clearly, kind of the driving force of it, but you really did a good job of focusing on all the other people at Spumco that kind of contributed to this show and made it so special.
Definitely.
And so, you know, I think that focus on the other people at Spumco at the start might have worked to your benefit, because it kind of lets you compartmentalize the show that was created by Spumco with kind of everything that came after, and John K's personal life. And you know, I think to your point, Robyn had a pretty, you know, really good way to look at, you know, his actions versus the show itself and the things that were created by the collaboration of everyone.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny is people will never understand how difficult it was to fit this new stuff in, you know, and we had some amazing editors, but you know, there's people that are going to say like, I mean, I don't want to hear any of that. I just want to see the show, you know, I just want to know about this and all that. And it just, we tried a lot of different versions of how to tell her story. And we went, you know, we spent months and months going back and forth, trying it one way, screening it, not working, trying it another way. So it was really difficult to take something that is completely right field and sew that in there so it's not confusing or, you know, whatever. So yeah, just people should know how difficult it was, you know, to put in this new stuff.
Yeah, because the Robyn story happens after Ren and Stimpy. I mean, or, you know, after John's involvement in Ren and Stimpy. So, you know, chronologically, you're jumping ahead like 5 years before it even started. And then, you know, she lived with him for 7 during that time. So, and then of course the allegations came out 2 years ago. So, you know, you can't just plop Robyn in or start talking about Robyn's story when she has zero, you know, relevance directly to the making of Ren and Stimpy. She wasn't an artist on the show. She wasn't at Spumco during that time of those first couple seasons. So, you know, how do you weave this person in that doesn't have a relevancy until, you know, after the show has been off the air for years, you know, and, you know, had Ren and Stimpy not had such a relevance to pop culture and, you know, people's lives, you know, would her story been as relevant to this audience? Probably not, you know. So it was really tricky. And like Kimo said, we tried a bunch of different stuff. And, you know, there was one a journalist that just wrote, well, they should have just tore the whole film apart and started again. And it's like, you know, maybe you should have asked us, because we did. And 2 out of the 3 editors won Oscars. So, you know, we were in good company. It's not like we were a bunch of bumpkins, you know, just trying to wing it and figure it out. We did, and it was a challenge. And, you know, I think, you know, we're very pleased with the way it came out. Is, you know, is it a perfect film? None are, but I think for what this, you know, documentary, it's not a script, documentaries, the truth dictates the story. So that's also something you got to consider.
Well, I think, you know, for someone like me going in blind, you know, I hadn't watched, or I hadn't even followed anything, because like I said, I hadn't thought about Ren and Stimpy until the documentary came out. So kind of, it provided this painful but very interesting arc as you're kind of like learning about the show, and then some of the, you know, conditions at Spumco and some of the obsessions that John had that caused kind of the show to fall apart. And then you learn about his personal life, and it kind of is this journey, this very, you know, interesting and painful journey that you go through. So I think that was I think hats off to your editors. They did a great job getting kind of everything in there into some concise narrative.
Yeah.
So
I'm not taking my hat off, although I do symbolically.
And so it sounds like John K's involvement came after the news broke. It sounds, you know, maybe he wanted to clear the air somehow, but I think that was also, you know, lucky is probably not the right word, but, you know, I think it does help the film, to your point about having the creator on there. So that was,
yeah, I mean,
is that kind of how it happened?
Yeah, well, it took 6 months. I mean, Richard Purcell, who was acting as a go-between, came to us after the news broke and said, you know, John's had this change of heart and he wants to, you know, tell, you know, his story. And so, you know, Kimo and I too were like, I don't know, at this point, the film's done. But then ultimately said, okay, let's do it. And then, you know, we met with John probably once a week for, like I said, 6 months before he agreed to sit down on camera. And You know, there was definitely some building of trust there on both sides. Is he going to be open and forthcoming on, you know, from our side? And is it going to be worth completely tearing down the film for his involvement? And then on the other side, you know, he was talking about obviously some very personal things. And so he wanted to make sure it wasn't going to be, you know, let's peel John Kay, despite the fact that he did some really terrible things, you know, I mean, so.
So you mentioned that Viacom was very, you know, generous or forgiving with your use of the archival footage. One of the things I love is just seeing, you know, the old cartoons in, you know, in a beautiful new format, and also some of the, you know, the pitch meetings were very interesting and very kind of energetic and, you know, enjoyable to watch. Where did you find that archival footage? Was that all through Viacom, or did you know, did the Spumco people have some old clips and things like that, or?
Yeah, it was kind of a, you know, it's one of those things where you interview somebody and they're like, you know, I think Bruce Timm has some footage. And then, you know, it just kind of gets spread around, and we shot, God, how many, 50, 60 interviews. So, you know, we spoke to a lot of people. Unfortunately, a lot of them didn't make it on camera just simply because of the length of the, you know, we could have made a mini series out of this. And, you know, Bill Ray keeps going, well, you should have. And I'm like, well, if we could afford it, we would have.
I second that. You should make a
yeah,
mini series.
well, thank you. But so, yeah, a lot of the archival was, you know, and then us kind of scraping the internet, and, you know, places like NBC Universal were extremely generous, and some of the footage that they allowed us to use and helped us out. And so, but yeah, it was really a mixture. Chris Gore supplied some footage. And then, of course, I'm blanking on his name right now, and I feel terrible, but he supplied a lot of the original drawings. Who was it, Kimo?
Oh, well, so Jerry Beck had some.
Oh, yes, Jerry Beck.
Jerry Beck had some archival.
Yeah, a lot of that.
A lot of good stuff. And then Richard Purcell had some amazing archival, and Teal and all kinds of people.
Yeah.
You know, had stuff, and yeah, and the video was just hodgepodge of different, you know, E! Entertainment did a big story on them when they were, when Ren and Stimpy was at the peak, so we used a lot of the E! Entertainment story, and Canada had done some stories on Bob Jakes and the Carbuncle crew, so we used some of that. So yeah, just scouring, you know, the internet and talking to people, and one guy asking another guy, and then even Brian Mendelsohn, who was the sound guy, he had all the original DAT tapes, and he still had all the sound effects queued up, so we did a whole thing. He's actually in the DVD extras. But yeah, he goes through all the sound effects, so, you know, just you know, begging, basically, a lot of these people.
Yeah, Brian, that's a good point. Brian was really helpful. We got into a situation in post-production where we needed to clean up some audio, and we're like, Brian, you know, there's a section, and what do? We can't separate the music from the voice, and it needs cleaning up, and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I got it. See if this works. And, you know, FedEx us a DAT tape that hadn't been rolled in, like, you know, 30 years. And so we took it to another friend, Bruce, who was like, hey, I'll give it a shot. I actually have a DAT player that still works. We're like, go, Bruce. And it did. It was crazy. It sounded like it was recorded yesterday. It was really pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So it sounds like all the, you know, people involved, and you kind of mentioned this earlier, were very amenable to helping in the documentary, and kind of very...
And actually there was even some fans, the hardcore fans that have collected a lot of the original layout drawings.
Yeah.
So we begged them to do some scanning, and you know, so yeah, it was
Andrew Dozer. Was it that Andrew Dozer?
Yeah, Andrew Dozer, yeah.
Yeah,
so we pulled from everywhere.
Yeah, he was awesome. Huge help.
That's awesome. One thing that kind of struck me in the documentary is there's a line, I forget who's saying it, but someone said, you know, John is Ren and Lynne is Stimpy. Is she, I mean, I can see it, but is she okay with that comparison, or is that something that maybe she's not the happiest about, being compared with Stimpy?
You know, Lynne, I think really a big point of that is just her heart. And I think probably every guy on the Spumco crew fell in love with her because she was talented. She's, you know, obviously beautiful, and just beautiful in her heart. I mean, she's just such a lovely, kind person. And the fact that she was willing to speak on camera about Ren and Stimpy, I mean, we were overjoyed that she was willing to do it, because she's a pretty private person. So I'm hoping she sees the kindness of Stimpy is what, you know, we're referencing, as opposed to some of Stimpy's other attributes, you know. Yeah. But she is just such a, you know, and she was married to Chris Riccardi, and of course Chris passed away, and it was just such heartbreaking news. I mean, Chris was just such a great guy, and very generous, and gave us 4 interviews and approached us after the news about John broke, and was like, look, there's some things you guys want to hear. And so both of them, we just, you know, we can't thank them enough, you know.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I think that's how we meant it. Lynne was definitely kind of the heart of the operation, and John was more of the driving force, I guess would be a way to describe it. So it sounds like there are some, you know, extras that are maybe on, you know, maybe available on the digital version or on a DVD release. Are there any funny stories from making the film, or you know, even like outtakes or archival footage that didn't make it into the final show, the actual Ren Stimpy show? Anything like that fans can look for?
Well, to your point, iTunes has, if you buy it, I believe you get the same DVD extras as the Blu-ray extras if you buy it. Double check that, but yeah, so they're able, for whatever the agreement is, they're able to supply all those extras. Kimo, were you going to say, was there a story that you remember?
There's an hour and 7 minutes of extra stuff. There's 10 separate clips of just outtakes. We could have done probably 40 hours, to be quite honest. We have so many stories. I mean, it just goes on and on. But there was a limit to what could fit on a Blu-ray and all this kind of stuff. So, but yeah, I mean, as far as like actually making the doc, I mean, there was a, you know, nothing that stands out. It actually went fairly smoothly, I would say. You know, yeah. There wasn't anything too outrageous that happened.
I think probably just
except for restarting the documentary 3 times.
Well,
yeah, that wasn't. I think one of the things that really we found pretty funny that you don't really see in the documentary, maybe once or so, but anybody who spoke about John always spoke in his voice. So it was always like, well, you know, Ren's got to be drawn like this, and if you don't draw it, you're gonna get, and like everybody. Well, if the color is not right, you know, it was so funny, and everybody nailed his voice. Like everybody there's the same version of John in the same voice. You know, whether it was Teal or, you know, Lynne or you know, Bob Camp or whatever. So that was really funny to see that. So we kind of felt like we knew John even before we met him.
Yeah. He seems like someone that's going to make an impression on you and leave an impact, positive and negative. But you know, it is what it is. Yeah. And this is actually kind of perfect that both of you hadn't seen Ren Stimpy before, because one thing that I noticed while watching it is that the cartoon still seems edgy even today, and maybe I just am out of touch with what, you know, is cool and normal these days. But it still felt like something that I you know, should be on late night TV and not on the kids network. You know, how did you both feel seeing it for the first time, you know, in modern times?
Yeah, I mean, as far as you know, as far as I wasn't as shocked when I watched it, you know, just because I have all the history before that, right? But somebody who's watching for the first time is a 14-year-old kid in 1991 that has never seen anything like this. It's going to be incredibly shocking to them. But so I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage because I have all this, I've seen all this other shocking stuff now. So to me, it wasn't as shocking, but I could see how it would have been in that time, you know, of turning on a TV and having your, you know, mom walk past and hearing fart jokes or something of, you know, so it's I can definitely see where the shockingness would come from, but I wasn't like incredibly like, oh my God, I can't believe, you know, so, and you know, a lot of the jokes are subtle, you know, you have to pay attention. They hide a lot of that stuff. There's a lot of subtle jokes. They're not just in your face with a lot of the stuff. So, you know, a lot of kids aren't as in tune to that, you know, until they rewatch it as an adult. Yeah. And then they get, you know, which is what we got a lot when we interviewed people, is they watched it as a kid and then they rewatched it as an adult and they're like, oh my God, all this stuff that got past me, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah, like Jim Ballantine mentions the glass coffee table collection. And like Jim, we'll leave it there.
Yeah, you got to do your own research on that.
Yeah, exactly.
So now I want to move into, and I call it the lightning round. It's just, quick questions. Usually it's about the film or the characters. This one, it's a little bit more about, Ren and Stimpy and cartoons, but they're very lightweight. They're, you can choose to answer or not, although I try to keep them very answerable. You can say as much or as little as you would like. So I think I know the answer to this from your previous answer of not watching Ren and Stimpy, but did you have a favorite cartoon from, kind of the Nickelodeon trilogy that came out, Doug, Rugrats, and Ren and Stimpy, or was that just something that neither of you watched?
No, didn't watch any of it. I mean, obviously, if I were to think of myself as back then, I'm sure I would have gravitated to just Ren and Stimpy only, because we watched, we also during this, we watched some Dougs and Rugrats, and it's just not, it's not even in the same sort of ballpark. So I would have definitely been just an R&S fan.
Yeah, agreed.
I was a Doug fan, but I think that spoke to me when I was a kid.
Yeah.
No judgments.
Different people. Yeah.
No judgments.
So I guess what is your favorite cartoon?
Of all time, or?
Yeah, all time.
I would say just the Bugs Bunnies. I would say the Bugs Bunnies would probably be at Looney Tunes, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the beauties of doing this doc, is going back and reviewing all the references for Ren and Stimpy. And it's just extraordinary seeing that Warner Brothers work. I mean, it really, it's incredible. So yeah, pretty much pick anything, anything Clampett did, is extraordinary.
And those parallels in the documentary are something that I, to your point, I never would have caught as a kid, but kind of seeing them, interposed or at least talked about back to back in the documentary, you really do see the influences from some of those classic cartoons and, that style that kind of was pulled into Ren and Stimpy. Yeah. So have you worked for a terrible boss before?
No.
You can answer as much or as little.
I'd have to say, I mean, there was maybe one in there. I mean, we worked in the film industry, so you're dealing with a lot of bosses per year. So yeah, maybe one or two of those guys wouldn't have been that nice, but overall, I've worked with pretty cool people in my life.
Yeah, same thing. Kimo and I worked on a lot of jobs together, and yeah, I think I will say there were definitely instances where people were crossing the line, and you could see it, especially looking back with today's lens. You're like, oof. But for the most part, people were fairly decent, except for one guy, but we can't get sued, and we both know who that is, so we're going to keep it under wraps. So
we'll keep everything anonymous. Did that hypothetical terrible boss create something great from the effort that person forced?
He wasn't he was a department head, but he wasn't, a lead creative. So, he was a little bit farther down the line.
Yeah.
So, Ren and Stimpy are a cat and a dog. So do you have a cat?
I do not. I personally do not care for cats. I'm a dog person.
Okay.
My wife has 2 cats. Surprisingly, they're not up here, but there you have it.
All right. And I guess the next question, do you have a dog? Kimo?
I do not. I had a pug at one point. It was years ago. So now no pets.
Yeah. Same thing. Used to have a dog, loved it, but unfortunately went away with a relationship.
So one of the things I liked was the original kind of Spumco story of how they all kind of gathered in one, studio apartment and were, living kind of that starving artist lifestyle. You all have been in the film industry for a while. Do you have a similar kind of starving artist origin story or starving artist experience?
Yeah, just the first couple of years coming out here, in the sort of late 80s is when I got out here, 87. So yeah, I mean, roommates, in a 1-bedroom apartment, like on the couch, that kind of thing. So I did that for just a little bit, but not too long, probably about a year to year and a half. And then by that point, I was working enough to sort of pick better roommates at that point. And then after then, I was on my own. So not a little bit of it in the beginning.
Yeah, I suppose too, looking back, like if we were, in the same position now as we were then, it may seem a lot worse. But back then, I think, certainly I was just so excited to be in LA. I would have lived in a tent, and just loved it. So I think, and I imagined it was probably a lot worse. But looking back, then, you put those nostalgic lenses on, or lenses of nostalgia, and go, oh, wasn't that a great time? And then I imagine I'm like, ramen again.
You're like, I was so free. I could do whatever I wanted.
Yeah, right. Sure.
Did you use the Mr. T roach traps? I think it was Mr. T, right?
Muhammad Ali.
Muhammad Ali roach traps.
Yeah.
So I assume now that you've seen pretty much every Ren and Stimpy episode, do you have a favorite episode? Is there one that comes to mind?
Yeah, the fan mail. That would be mine. That one's just really just has a lot going on emotionally in that one, and that one I absolutely love that one. And then the Stimpy's First Fart, or Son of Stimpy as it's known now, just because the artwork was beautiful. I mean, they actually hired other Disney artists to help work on that one. So those would be my two.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to go with Toothache and Space Madness. I know it's like answering what's your favorite film, and you say The Godfather. It's probably cliche at this point, but I cannot look at that nerve pulling and still not. And then honestly, every time I see the button sequence in Space Madness, it kills me. I mean, I still laugh we've seen that clip 1,000 times, and it's just so funny.
I haven't seen them recently enough, so I'm not sure what my favorite episode would be, but I did really enjoy just kind of seeing all the clips and remembering them. So
yeah,
we tried to fit as many in there as we could,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, there were so many great sequences that I just kind of were seen as a kid and hadn't thought about. So it was really, really fun to see. Do you have a favorite Ren and Stimpy character?
I would go with Powdered Toast Man, just because it is such a weird character. He's just so bizarre. The fact that they came up with that, he flies backwards. I mean, it's just like the whole thing. It's just, I would go with him for me.
Yeah, I'll go with the Pope. I mean, who doesn't like Frank Zappa?
I'm sorry, Powdered Toast Man is the correct answer.
Yeah. Fair enough.
So, do you have a favorite piece of Ren and Stimpy merch that you acquired during this filming, or is that something that you kind of didn't collect?
No, I got a lunch tray from Bill Ray. Bill Ray had a lunch tray sitting in his backyard, and we were walking through his backyard once when I was shooting some of his original art. And he found this tray, and it was like still wrapped in the plastic. And he's like, "You want this?" And I just went, "Okay." Wow. So I took it. So it's just like sitting in my room, But yeah, that would be probably the little bit of stuff that I have.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
Christina, one of our editors, she just started on the project, and it was around the holiday time, so she gave us a stuffed log. So that has good memories, because it was in the very beginning of the process, and we were still so like, oh my God, this is so amazing, before the roller coaster ride of getting a film out the door. So
shortly after watching this film, a branch fell in my backyard, and I had to chainsaw the branch into pieces. And as I was taking, I was like thinking of the log song as I was taking these logs to my crib. So.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Do you have any predictions for the reboot? Do you think maybe third time they'll be able to recapture it, or is it just going to be something that maybe will evoke the old show but won't have that same kind of spark?
Hard to say, but I would say that show was lightning in a bottle, and that's where that phrase comes from, is because you only get it once. So, good luck to them, best of luck to them. But that show was just incredibly unique with all the people that it brought together at the time that it came together, and just everything worked. So, and then plus you're going to have, new fans and then the original fans. So like maybe the people that have never seen Ren and Stimpy that will watch and be like, oh, this is great. But the people that grew up with the show are going to be like, this is not even close to, blah. So it just kind of, I guess it depends on who really watches it. But I would think like capturing that original magic is just, I personally don't think it's going to happen. But like I said, I best of luck to them trying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think to your point, you kind of need a special type of personality, a special kind of madness to even come up with that type of a show, and then to make it tie together in the weird, strange ways that it does. It does feel like something that'd be very difficult to capture. But
yeah,
best of luck to them. I would love to see more Ren and Stimpy if it can capture that same magic.
Yeah. Cool.
So last question is what's next for you all? I know that the documentary is finally out, and sounds like maybe there's some more press and maybe some future theatrical release of it. But what are you all turning your attention to next? Any other childhood memories of mine that you want to ruin? Is that a tool?
Touche. Yeah, just doing a lot of pitching. There's a couple projects now. We picked up a manager at Sundance, Adam Galvin, over at Rain Management. Great guy. He's been working with us now for 6-8 months. And there's a lot of projects that are on the docket. It's just a matter of COVID and when we can get out and start shooting. So we're really excited and feel really fortunate that we had a chance to go to Sundance before all this happened. And we had a pretty strong festival schedule, which unfortunately got put on the back burner. But a huge shout out to those folks for really changing our lives. So.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, whatever it is, I can't wait to see it. I'm sure it'll be enlightening and hopefully it'll be a smoother creation than this last documentary. But it just like the show, this documentary was definitely something special. So
thank you very much. That's very kind.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, no problem.
Got it.
All righty.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.
That was Ron Cicero and Kimo Easterwood, the directors of Happy Happy Joy Joy, the Ren and Stimpy story. It's an interesting documentary. It kind of deals with a show that I think a lot of us watched, but maybe didn't really get the full story behind. It kind of the show came out in a time before the internet when you didn't really have all the information, and there have been some revelations that have come out in the last couple of years that really make the documentary something timely and important to watch. So you should give it a watch. It's available on Gravitas Ventures on digital and all of your major digital distributors. And if you liked this interview, please feel free to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. It helps me out a lot. It helps make sure that the videos go directly to you and you get notifications. And as always, please go to watcherpass.com for all your movie news, reviews, interviews, deals, and recommendations. Thank you.